Okay, today we're talking about finding equivalent percentages with fractions, and we've got two methods we're going to study today. The first method is by setting up a proportion. So since percent means out of 100, I can find an equivalent ratio out of 100. So for 1/8, we set up 1/8 equals x over 100, and we set up a cross product equation to solve for x. From there, we know that 8 times x is equal to 1 times 100. I divided both sides by 8 and ended up with x equals 12.5. And if x is 12.5 out of 100 means the percentage is 12.5%. So then for the second one we're going to do together with this same method, we're going to try to find the equivalent to 4/5. So I want the percent equivalent to 4/5. So I'm going to set up an equal part to whole ratio, but this time my equal part to whole ratio is going to be out of 100. So there's a couple of ways I can solve this proportion. We've been working really hard in class on cross products. So we're going to use a cross product equation. However, I know that I can also, these work as equivalent fractions, and 5 goes into 100 20 times, so I can make a prediction that 5 times 20 is 100, so 4 times 20 would be 80. So I'm going to go ahead and create a cross product equation, but I'm going to also realize that there's other ways I can solve for x. So 5 times x is equal to 4 times 100. 5x equals 400. And now I can divide both sides by 5. If I do something to one side, I'm going to do it to the other side. It works like a balance scale. Also, I know my goal here is to get x, my variable, all by itself. So the inverse of multiplying by 5 is dividing by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1, and 1 times x is x. And then 400 divided by 5 is 80. So x equals 80. Then I'm going to look to where my x came from. It's 80 over 100 is the equivalent fraction to 4/5. So if it's 80 out of 100, then my equivalent percent is 80%. We're going to pause and then do method 2. Okay, so our second method is that we are going to change the fraction to a decimal, which we learned how to do earlier in the year. And to remind you, to change a fraction to a decimal, I can put the top dog in the house. So we drew a little dog house here to help us remember that when I'm dividing to change a fraction to a decimal, my numerator is my dividend and my denominator is the divisor. So 3 divided by 5. And then here I got 3/5 is equal to 6/10. Then, after I have a decimal, we learned earlier this week how to change a decimal to a percent. So we know that we need to multiply by 100 to change a decimal to a percent. We used our DP method for that. So decimal to percent, we move the arrow to the right. So we move our decimal to the right 2 places. So here we started with 3/5. We found 3/5 is equal to 6/10 as a decimal. And then I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the right. And I know that 6/10 is equal to 60%. So let's try that with 2/3. So top dog goes in the house. I'm going to put my 2 as my dividend and 3 as my divisor. 3 doesn't go into 2, so I'm going to add a decimal and a 0 and bring that up. 3 goes into 20 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. Subtract. I have 2. I'm not done yet, so I'm going to add another 0 and bring it down. 3 goes into 26 times, and 6 times 3 is 18. At this point, I can start to tell that it's repeating. So I'm going to think ahead, because I know that my next step is going to be to change the decimal to a percent and multiply it by 100. So if I go ahead and think about multiplying this by 100, my whole number place value for my percent is going to be 66. Now, then I could go forward and do 66.6 repeating percent. But 0.6 repeating percent is not a very good answer because it's not measurable. So I'm going to go back to my division. And if I look at my remainder down here, it's a 2. And my divisor is a 3. So I can use those 2 numbers to write a fraction for what's left over. So I'm going to instead say that 2/3 is equal to 66 and 2/3%. And that's a better answer because it's measurable. So anytime you have those repeating numbers, make sure that you don't give a 0.6 repeating 4%.